The first few sections are really about the basic parts and components of music theory. We've been going over rhythm, we've been going over the C major scale, etc., the dyads, and all of those. We've been going over the basics of triads too, which now we know there are 6 types. There's the major, the minor, there's the diminished, the augmented, which both the diminished and the augmented we tend not to use very much. Then there are these other chords which kind of aren't chords, but we're calling them chords. The sus2, which remember has no 3, or the sus4, which also has no 3 until you give the 3. So those are really the 4 chord types. We also went through and talked about the C major scale and the triads that belong in them. So we know that there's C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, and then here, B diminished, and then again, C major. Now, what we're about to do is to move kind of beyond these basics. We're going to get into a couple of topics over the next few videos that are going to cover some of the more useful parts to working with triads. Because what we're going to do is we're going to make things a little easier on our fingers when we're writing, and we're going to start making choices about different chords. In other words, if you know this chord, that's terrific, but it doesn't make any value to you if you don't know where to go from there. You're just sort of randomly picking and choosing chords. So in this video, we're going to talk about a few different 2-chord sentence structures that are kind of the basic building blocks of songwriting. And I'm going to go through a few of them that are really popular, really easy to work with. And then beyond that, in one of the next videos, we're going to go through something called inversions. And inversions allow you to make things much easier on your fingers. And that's when songwriting really kicks in. After that, I'll do a pretty deep example of how to both songwrite, make tracks, make chords, make chord progressions, and best of all, how to practice all of this so that you can get really fast at it. And what usually ends up happening is that your practice sessions become songwriting sessions accidentally. And that's the best part. So let's just get started. Okay, so the first step along the way is to take these chords, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, take the chords of the C major scale and start putting them together in 2-chord phrases. And there are some very traditional, very useful 2-chord combinations that are always available to you. And these are known as cadences. Now, the word cadence, sometimes it's a name, sometimes there are people named Cadence, and the idea behind cadence is it's both a function of rhythm. What is the pacing of something? What is the cadence of something? Drummers talk about having a drum cadence. But for us, cadences are 2-chord phrases. And one of the classics, really the authentic cadence, is something that is known as the 5-1 cadence. And what that means is that we play the 5 chord of any major scale. In the C major scale, it's G. So we take this chord, and you'll know that this chord is major, minor, diminished. Which one is this? Quick quiz. Right, it's G major, and we know that because we have major, minor, minor, major, major. Little side note, if you remember from here to here is a whole step, from here to here is a whole step, and from here to here to here is a half step, you know whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. And if you have whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, you also have major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished, and then major again. Which means at any point in time, if I say, what's the triad quality of the 6th scale degree? You're going to say major 1, minor 2, minor 3, major 4, major 5, minor 6, minor. You're going to say the 6 is minor. Until eventually this becomes second nature. You'll know the 6 is minor, the 2 is minor, the 3 is minor, the 7's diminished, the 4, the 5, the 1 are all major. Okay, and it's just going to come boom, 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 boom. But for now, remember major, minor, minor, major, major. So the 5-1 cadence is basically a 5-1. This is a traditional kind of end of the Mass, end of church, end of the prayer. It would be kind of the same as doing an Amen. So and I'll do it from here down, and then I'll do it from here up. And it's a little more clear as when you go up. So you can almost, forgive my hoarse voice this morning, but you can almost hear it as being like an Amen. Okay. So it's a very traditional 2-chord sequence known as the authentic cadence. Now, how this is useful is that you can literally go back and forth between the 1 and the 5, and you've got yourself a little bit of a song progression. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do that. I've got some drums worked up here, and I'm just going to do this to the drums because I think it's a lot more interesting to play it rhythmically over drums than it is to just play it abstractly out of nowhere. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit play, and then I'm going to do my 5-1 sequence, and we're going to have some fun. Here we go. That's it. Very simple. So now if we look at this clip, you can see there is my C chord. Let me zoom this up for everyone a little bit. That's a little better. So now, one thing to notice is you'll see I'm playing with the left hand and the bass down here. You'll see it moves from C to G to C to G to C, back to G, and then loops around to C bottom. So it's low, middle, high, middle, high, middle, low. And that's the progression, which is really important because you want to think about chords as going kind of up or down. And that's really, really important. Chords moving up tend to brighten, lift, and re-energize the sequence, whether it's moving happier, 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 or whether it's moving serious, more serious, more serious. Down tends to flatten the energy or lower the energy. Maybe it's mellowing out in a chill way. Maybe it's mellowing out in a sad, depressive kind of way. The point is moving up and moving down have a big impact on the emotional feel of a progression. So what's happening here is we're starting low, kind of simple and mellow, moving up to G, having a little bit of tension. We moved up a bunch by a good, stable, strong fifth here. And now we're moving up another perfect fourth, kind of a happy, personal fourth over here. And so we go from a major up to a major, up to a major. So you can feel like the happiness is lifting, lifting, lifting. And when it comes down here, it's sort of like fake, fake, haha, and then down, back to the beginning. So that's the way this progression kind of works and feels really emotionally. And let's just play it back and you can watch it kind of go down. Okay, and that's it. Super, super, super easy. The 1 and the 5 are really, 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 really useful. So I played kind of a simple, almost churchy version of it. And for fun, I'm going to sequence in another one. Okay, this one is going to be a little more, we're going to make it almost reggae. Okay, because this kind of chord progression, this 1-5, there's sometimes the 1-4-5, which we'll get to next. It's very, very popular in smiley, happy, feel good vibes reggae music. So let me see what I can do here. The exact same progression. It's just that when we play it short and staccato like this, it feels a little more like it's reggae, and it feels a little more snappy, a little more bouncy. But otherwise, it's the exact same thing. C, G, C, G, C again, and then G, and then back to the beginning. The only difference is that this first one, I played a legato, a whole note bass, and here I played quarters and eighths, little tiny notes. You can feel how this is really empty, leaves a lot of room for vocals, perhaps. This leaves a little less room for vocals, or if I were the bass player, I would hold this note to establish it's the beginning of the phrase, and then cut, tap, chop, chop, and then so you're doing this to kind of work more with the drums. But the point is, it's a 1 chord, it's a 5 chord, it's a 1 chord. Back and forth and back and forth. This is called the authentic cadence. Now, I am going to take these two guys. I'm actually going to leave them there. And what I'm going to do is build a couple of other cadences. So what we have is the authentic, which is the 1, 5, back to the 1. It's a pretty serious sounding, happy progression. Now, something that's a little bit mellower is something that's known as the plagal, or really sometimes known as the half cadence. Or actually, you can interchange them. Plagal is a word, half is a word, and these are very clearly defined in the book, so I encourage you to go back there and take a look. The idea is here that you're not using the 1 and the 5 chord, you're using the 1 and the 4 chord. Now, technically, the plagal cadence is to go from the 4 chord to the 1 chord. That's kind of a different amen. It's a little mellower. This one would be more like amen. You can hear the inner voice, what I'm doing in the inner voice, which is F to E. F being the root of the 4 chord, and then E being the third, or the major third, in fact, of the C chord. But the point is, instead of using G and C, we're going to use F and C. Now, technically, the plagal cadence is from 4 down to 1, and then the half cadence is from a 1 up to a 4. These are very traditional terms. They may or may not be useful in your daily life. In fact, they're almost guaranteed not to be useful in your daily life. But what is useful in your daily life is if you want a really kind of super big happy progression, you've got the big happy between the 5 and the 1, and you've got the medium happy between the 4 and the 1. So let's see what happens when I do, and I'll make this a little bit longer. I'll do both the reggae and the straight in this same clip between the 1 and the 4. Okay, so you heard me goof a little bit in there. The best part about live is that you can grab the note and fix it. So, I think it was right there. That's the note that does not belong. And no, it's like I never made a mistake. We now have the 1 chord, the 4 chord, or the 1 chord and the 5 chord. But what happens if you put these two cadences and smash them together? You get what we call the 1, 4, 5, which honestly is the foundation of tons of songs. And again, the idea behind the 1, 4, 5 is that you're playing a 1 chord, a 4 chord, a 5 chord, and then back to a 1 chord. Now that's the simplest version. And to give you an idea, that would be like Richie Valens and La Bamba, right? It starts on G. Baila, baila, la bamba. And I'm not going to sing for you because that's just overly embarrassing. But the point is, that's really just starts on 5, 1, 4, 5, 4, 4, 1, 4, 5. And the fact that it starts with a 5 and then to a 1 lets you know that right out the gate, the song is actually starting with an authentic cadence. So that's one version of the 1, 4, 5. It's 1, 4, 5, 4, 1, 4, 5. It's the very same progression. In fact, it's the exact same progression to the Beatles' Shake It Up Baby, which was like, shake it up, baby, now. Etc. My singing, you'll have to forgive. You can go ahead and sing it for yourself, but it's the same progression. It's a 1, 4, 5. Now, Bob Marley would be like, a melody pure and true. This is my message to you. You're all laughing, I hope. My singing is not on point today, but that's not the point. What is the point is now I have the Beatles, I have Bob Marley, and I have Richie Valens, all three using the 1, 4, 5 to create a very simple, pure, happy, upwardly moving 3-chord progression. Now, the 1, 4, 5 is probably the most popular, in fact, the most simple 3 chord, 2 chord, 4 chord progression you can use. If all you have is the 1, the 4, and the 5, you know they're all major. It's going to be the first chord in the sequence, and no matter what the key, for example, if I move this to F, this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. So my F 1, 4, 5 progression would be F major, B flat major, C major. The 1, 4, 5 is ubiquitous. It doesn't care what key you're in. It's the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord. Now, just to be difficult, or just to open up the pathway to other creative ways to use this progression, what if we move everything up 1? Okay, we're not going to do the 1, 4, 5. We're going to do the 2, 5, 6. And what this is showing you is that the relationship of a chord up a fourth to another chord, up a major second to another chord, changes as you start and end in different places. In this case, we have C major, F major, G major, now becomes D minor, G major, A minor. So let's just play with that and see what happens. Not with you. Let's just play with this and see what happens. So as you can see, the emotion of that progression changed dramatically. This is not nearly as happy-go-lucky as the 1, 4, 5, because now we have a minor chord leading off and a minor chord bookending the progression, with only a major chord in the middle as almost like a stepping stone. So the point is, the 1, 4, 5 gives us a chord relationship. We have a chord up a perfect fourth to another chord, up a major second from there to a third chord. Now, when it's all majors, it's real hard to get away from the kind of super happiness of it. But when some of them are minor, all of a sudden that takes on a whole different flavor. Now, this is setting us up for a conversation about keys and major versus minor. And we haven't gotten to the minors yet. We're kind of still in the major world. Even though we have a 2 minor, a 5 major, and a 6 minor chord, they're all based on home, or the key, or the 1 being C. So even in this progression, I would eventually have to bring it back to C to keep us in the key of C. And what we're going to do now is go over a few different chord progressions. So I gave you the 1, 4, 5. In this case, I also gave you the 2, 5, 6. And now I'm going to give you probably the most ubiquitous, meaning useful and well-used chord progression. It's known as the 1, 4, 5, 6. Some people call it the 1, 6, 4, 5. If you watch the video, go to YouTube and look up Axis of Awesome, 4-chord pop song. I think I even have a link here in the class. You'll see how they've strung together, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 different songs using the exact same 4 chord progressions. And they are the 1, the 4, so you've got a half cadence, and then you've got the 6 to a 5, back to the 1, with an authentic cadence at the end. So what's happening with the 6 chord is something that's known as the deceptive cadence. And the deceptive cadence says, I'm going from 1 chord. The assumption is I might be going to 1 next, but haha, I'm not. For example, with 1 and 4, if that's a half cadence, you would expect the plagal cadence to bring you back down. And if I went to 5, you would expect the authentic cadence to bring you back down, but I'm not. I'm going from 4, not to 1. I'm deceiving you and going to 6. And then I'm going to 5, setting up the authentic cadence back to the 1. Now that's the 1, in this case 1, 4, 6, 5. And you probably already know a bunch of songs that do that. And you can vary this up. So there's like 1, 5, 6, 4, which is Let It Be from the Beatles, right? that's the Beatles. It's basically the exact same 4-chord progression. I'm going to let you do your research, watch the video. You'll see how many dozens and dozens of songs use this progression. And I'm going to play it for you just for fun here. And I'm actually going to record it because we might use it a little bit later. Now, I don't know if you noticed this, but what I did at the end there, when I went to the 5-chord, okay, that's G major that I temporarily suspended to bring back to G, back to C, and then when this note is already on C, I'm already set up to do C right down here. Okay, so that's one way that you can throw in a suspension chord in the middle of something. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take a deep dive look at these chord progressions, and I'm going to get into something known as voice leading, also known as triad inversions, because it's going to make this big jump of boom, 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 boom. It's going to make those jumps much easier when I start doing them a whole lot differently. So one thing to keep in mind is that while we're going over these authentic, plagal, half, and deceptive cadences, notice how they almost all use a 1, a 4, and a 5 in them. But you're really not restricted to using the 4 and the 5 in there. So any 2 chords can become a progression. For example, if you just want to go C, E. Okay, it's kind of a somber progression, but that's just a 1 to the 3 to the 1. You can also do a 1 and a 2. You can do a 1 and a 6. You know, you're not restricted. In fact, the 1 and the 6 is a really popular one too. It's known as the relative major, relative minor. You already know that. And it's going to set us up later for the conversation about, you know, C being major and A being minor. So we're literally going major world to minor world. And it's again kind of a 50s thing where you get like, I'll do it up here and I'll do it up here. Okay, that's a very 50s thing to do. And that's just the 1 and the 6 chord. I happen to be going 1 up high, down to the 6 chord, back up to the 1 chord. Now, I could also be doing that with the 1 and the 3 chord. And immediately, if I throw a little melody on top, I've got a song, right? It's very fast to work that way. 1s and 2s are very organic, so it's like... Okay, so not a big jump, not a big motion, very mellow between the 1 and the 2, somber in the 1 and the 3, kind of basic happy in the 1 and the 4, strong happy in the 1 and the 5, and strong happy then sad in, or happy then not happy at least, in the 1 and the 6. So this kind of, you know, putting emotional feelings on the notes, on the dyads, on the individual triads, and now on the distances between one triad and the next gives you an emotional language to use when you're putting together 1 chord, 2 chord, 3 chord, 4 chord, 5 chord combinations. You also want to think about distance and direction. We talked a little bit about direction. When you go up, things tend to rise in energy. When you go down, things tend to get down in energy. And distance is, well, if you're going up by a perfect 5th, which is a strong 5th, you're going to get a strong, uplifty, happy mood. And so these combinations of distance, direction between 2 notes, between 2 notes within a triad, between 3 notes within a triad, and then between these 3 notes of one triad, and then the direction to the next 3 notes of the next triad, that all conspires in your head and in your heart and in your experience to create basically an emotional sentence structure, a language that you can then naturally use to start writing and working on tracks. So right after this, we're going to get into inversions and how to do these chord progressions more easily with your fingers. And then right after that, we are going to do kind of a practicum, how to go about putting these things together, choosing chords, and that'll set us up for the biggest songwriting practice. And that will eventually let us get out of the key of C and go into other keys, which will set us up for the minor world. Woohoo!